In a world where the vast oceans were a ruthless arena for men, where every sail on the horizon could portend death or plunder, two women emerged who defied not only the storms, but also the very conventions of society, overturning the notion of who could be a maritime rogue. Mary Read, whose life began in England in the late 17th century, was destined for secrecy from birth. An illegitimate daughter, passed off by her mother as her deceased brother, she wore male clothing from infancy, living under the name of her dead half-sibling. This deception became more than just a mask, it was second nature to her. As she grew older, Mary worked relentlessly, first serving in the British Army. She fought fiercely on the fields of Flanders, displaying such unbridled valor that she earned not only the respect of her comrades, but also an officer's commission, which she could not accept due to her deception. Later, leaving military service for love, she married but was soon widowed, once again finding herself at a crossroads. Unbroken by grief, Mary donned men's attire again and sailed for the West Indies, hiring herself out as a sailor on a ship. There, off the coast of the New World, her vessel was captured by pirates. Faced with a choice between death and joining the ruthless sea robbers, Mary chose the latter. Her adaptation was swift. She didn't just survive, she thrived. Concealing her true identity among them, she fought with such ferocity and skill that she earned a reputation as one of the most fearless cutthroats on deck. At the same time, across the Atlantic in Ireland, another woman was growing up whose fate was no less turbulent, Anne Bonny. The daughter of a wealthy lawyer, she was known from a young age for her fiery temper and iron will. Her wild, untamed spirit could not be subdued by societal conventions that dictated meekness and obedience for women. From her youth, she displayed an extraordinary strength of character, bordering on cruelty. It was rumored that at 12 she attacked a servant with a knife, and at 16 she set her father's house on fire in a fit of rage. When her father moved the family to Charleston, South Carolina, Anne fell in love with a poor sailor and pirate named James Bonny. Ignoring her father's wrath, she married him, forfeiting her inheritance and severing all ties with her former life. Her marriage to James soon disappointed her. He turned out to be nothing more than a governor's informant, not a daring pirate. Anne, craving true freedom and adventure, found it in the charismatic and ruthless Captain John Rackham, known as Calico Jack. She left her husband, becoming Rackham's lover, and, more importantly, a full member of his crew. Like Mary, Anne concealed her gender, dressing in men's clothing, but her ferocity in battle was undeniable. She quickly transformed into a formidable fighter whose name instilled fear. Their meeting aboard Rackham's ship, the Revenge, was destined by fate, or rather, by bloody fortune. Initially, Mary, still skillfully hiding her true identity, even felt a certain affection for Anne, mistaking her for an attractive young sailor. But when the truth was revealed, instead of rivalry or enmity, a unique, unprecedented bond ignited between them, a camaraderie in arms, based on mutual respect for their fearlessness and willingness to go to any lengths. These two women became inseparable comrades, fighting shoulder to shoulder, often surpassing even the most seasoned male pirates in their fury and composure. Eyewitnesses described how Mary and Anne, armed with pistols and cutlasses, were the first to board captured ships, showing no mercy. Their names became legend, whispered from port to port, evoking a mixture of terror and admiration. However, even the most audacious adventures eventually come to an end. In October 1720, as Rackham and his crew, emboldened by rum and recent victories, lay anchored off the coast of Jamaica, they were caught by surprise by a ship commanded by Captain Jonathan Barnett. The male pirates, in a panic, hid in the hold, paralyzed by fear. But not Mary Read and Anne Bonny. These two women, like furies, emerged onto the moonlit deck, drawing their blades and pistols. They fought alone against superior forces, shouting curses at the cowardly men until they were finally overwhelmed and captured. At their subsequent trial in Spanish Town, Jamaica, both were sentenced to hang for piracy, a standard verdict for sea rogues. But in the face of death, they both claimed to be pregnant, invoking the ancient right of pleading the belly, which temporarily postponed their execution. What happened to Mary Red afterward is uncertain. She died in prison, presumably from fever. Anne Bonny's fate remains one of the greatest mysteries in pirate history, but her name is forever etched in the annals as a symbol of female defiance. Popular myths often portray female pirates as exotic, romanticized figures whose lives were merely a series of thrilling adventures. But the truth is far grimmer and more grounded. Mary Read and Anne Bonny were not exceptions to the rules of the pirate world. They were its embodiment. They were not romantic heroines of adventure novels, but brutal, pragmatic survivors in a world that gave them no other choice but to fight for every breath. Their lives were not a fairy tale of freedom, but a relentless struggle for survival, where each day could be their last, and cruelty was not a choice, but a necessity. They didn't just challenge gender stereotypes by donning male clothing, they redefined the very concept of female strength, proving that a woman could be as, and at times more, ferocious, desperate, and deadly than any man on deck. Their story is not about the romance of the sea, but about survival in a world that offered them no other option, and how they, against all odds, carved their way into legend, leaving behind not a lingering scent of adventure, but a bloody legacy that cannot be ignored. This bloody legacy, forged in blood and desperation, was inextricably linked to their masterful art of deception, a continuous series of cunning ploys that allowed them not only to survive, but to dominate in a world exclusively designed for men. For Mary Read, life was one grand, meticulously constructed pretense. From childhood, when her mother dressed her in male clothing, she began her journey in this grand mystification. It was not merely concealing her gender, it was a complete transformation of identity, a continuous performance where every detail, from her demeanor to her voice, had to be flawless. On the fields of Flanders, fighting shoulder to shoulder with soldiers, and then on the decks of merchant ships, she honed this skill, transforming her hidden femininity into an invisible weapon. She didn't just imitate a man, she became one in the eyes of those around her, earning respect through her valor and fearlessness. This deeply ingrained identity of Mark Red became her primary defense and, simultaneously, the key to her acceptance into the pirate brotherhood. When her ship was captured and she had to choose between death and joining the pirates, her already perfected male persona allowed her to instantly integrate into the crew without arousing the slightest suspicion. She was not a newcomer hiding in the shadows, but an already established man, ready for battle, whose adaptation to lawless life was swift precisely because of years of continuous deception. But the most audacious of their schemes unfolded aboard the Revenge, Calico Jack's ship. Imagine 2 women, the only ones in a crew of dozens of brutal men, each concealing her gender. This was not just concealment, but a complex daily game requiring incredible cunning and constant vigilance. Their secret, once revealed to each other, became a mutual protection. Mary and Anne became not just comrades, but accomplices in this grand deception. They covered for each other their inseparable bond, which the men likely mistook for a strong camaraderie, served as a perfect cover. Any suspicion, any careless remark could cost them not only their lives, but something far worse, torture and humiliation. They had to be not only strong in battle, but also masterful actresses, capable of maintaining composure in any situation, be it a drunken brawl in a tavern or a joint boarding action where any wrong move could rip off their mask. Their ability to maintain this dual life, fighting with fury and composure, was in itself an act of unprecedented audacity. And even when their bloody odyssey came to an end, when they faced the gallows, Mary and Anne demonstrated their exceptional cunning one last time. At their trial in Spanish Town, sentenced to death for piracy, they resorted to an ancient legal trick, pleading the belly, claiming pregnancy. This was not just a desperate measure, but a strategic maneuver which, according to the laws of the time, granted a woman a reprieve from execution until after childbirth. It was their final act of defiance, a last attempt to deceive a system that craved their death. They did not surrender, did not break, but until the very end, they sought loopholes, used every available means to prolong their lives, even if only for a few months. This ploy, though it did not save Mary, who died in prison, became a symbol of their unyielding will to live and their capacity for cunning even in the most desperate circumstances. Their capacity for survival and cunning was only part of the broader arsenal that Mary Red and Anne Bonny employed throughout their pirate careers. In a world where physical strength and brutality were currency, they developed a unique set of psychological and tactical maneuvers that allowed them not only to exist, but to dominate. For Mary Red, whose life was a continuous act of masquerade, the male persona became not just protection, but an instrument of power. She didn't merely conceal her femininity, she actively used the expectations associated with male behavior to earn trust and respect. Her fearlessness in battle, which men perceived as a display of true masculinity, was in fact the result of deep adaptation and psychological resilience. She fought with such fury that it left no room for doubt about her male identity, and anyone who might have questioned it quickly faced her deadly skill. This was a conscious reputation building where every sword stroke or pistol shot solidified her authority, transforming her from a mere crew member into a recognized fighter whose opinion carried weight. Anne Bonny, unburdened by the need for constant concealment from birth, used her male clothing more as a uniform, a symbol of her belonging to a world where her untamed nature could manifest fully. Her influence on Rackham's crew was based not on the cunning of disguise, but on pure, unadulterated ferocity. Anne didn't play the role of a man. She played the role of the most ruthless pirate on deck. Her fiery temper, her readiness for violence, rumored since her youth, were now not liabilities, but assets. She was the one who could easily intimidate, who was not afraid of blood and death. This created an aura of danger around her that made men respect her, and at times, fear her. She didn't need complex intrigue. Her tactic of influence lay in the direct, aggressive display of strength and will. Their joint dynamic aboard the Revenge was the pinnacle of their psychological toolkit. When their secret was revealed to each other, they forged a unique alliance that amplified their individual influence. They became a united front, an unwavering duo whose mutual support and common goal, to survive and dominate, made them virtually invulnerable to internal intrigues or attempts at discredit. The men saw them as inseparable, mistaking it for a strong camaraderie, but it was more a strategic partnership where each covered the other's back, enhancing their shared reputation as the bravest and most ruthless fighters. Their presence, their defiant courage, especially during their final stand, when they single-handedly confronted superior forces, shouting curses at the hiding men, was a powerful psychological blow. It wasn't just a fight. It was a public condemnation of cowardice, a demonstration of superiority that was forever etched in the memories of those who survived. They didn't just fight for their lives, they fought for their honor and for the right to be who they had forged themselves to be. Their adaptation to the pirate world was complete. They didn't just accept its rules, they became an integral part of them, using its brutality as a tool for self-actualization. In circumstances where legal paths to power or independence were closed, piracy offered them a twisted yet effective model of social mobility. They quickly learned the unwritten laws of the pirate brotherhood: equality in shares of plunder, the right to vote in decisions, the willingness to fight to the last. Moreover, they surpassed many of their comrades, displaying a level of dedication to this way of life that shocked even seasoned sea rogues. Their ability not only to withstand the constant threat of death, but to actively seek it in battle, was an indicator of their deep psychological transformation. They were not passive victims of circumstances, they were active architects of their destiny, using every element of their character and every opportunity the ruthless world of the Caribbean offered them to forge their own version of freedom and power. Thus, Mary Read and Anne Bonny didn't merely exist in the male world of piracy. They reforged it to their will, employing a unique blend of personal qualities and strategic decisions. Their fearlessness, adaptability, psychological resilience, and willingness to defy any norm all became their personal weapons, allowing them not just to survive, but to leave behind a legacy that could not be ignored. However, the world that Mary Read and Anne Bonny had so masterfully reforged to their will was rapidly changing, and on the horizon loomed a figure destined to bring their bloody era to an end. This man was Woodes Rogers, a figure no less controversial than the pirates themselves, but representing a completely different, unrelenting force. He was no armchair bureaucrat. Rogers himself was a battle-hardened privateer whose raids against Spanish galleons had brought him not only wealth, but also a deep knowledge of maritime lawlessness. In 1718, appointed governor of the Bahamas by King George I, he received a clear mandate to clear the Caribbean of pirates and especially to destroy their main stronghold, the infamous Nassau, which had become a true pirate republic. Rogers arrived in Nassau not as a conqueror, but as a herald of a new order, armed not only with a squadron of warships, but also with a royal pardon. He offered all pirates who laid down their arms by a certain deadline a full pardon for past crimes. This was a calculated and brutal blow to the very heart of the pirate brotherhood. Many, tired of constant flight and an unpredictable life, accepted this offer. Among them were such prominent figures as Benjamin Hornigold, who himself had once been one of the most formidable pirate captains, and now became a hunter of his former comrades. Thomas Jennings, another well-known privateer, also accepted the pardon, preferring a legal life. This move by Woodes Rogers fractured the pirate world, creating a deep rift between those who yearned for peace and forgiveness and those who, like Calico Jack, Mary Read, and Anne Bonny, chose a path of uncompromising, desperate resistance. For the British Crown and the growing mercantile empire, Rogers was not just a governor, but an instrument for restoring control over vital trade routes. His actions were aimed at protecting the interests of merchants, planters, and colonial administrations whose incomes suffered from pirate depredations. These beneficiaries of the new order craved stability and predictability so that their ships laden with sugar, tobacco, and precious metals could traverse the ocean unhindered. Rogers was their shield and sword, his campaign was relentless, and every captured or hanged pirate brought closer the advent of an era when the Caribbean would once again be a zone of legitimate trade, not anarchy. He systematically uprooted the roots of piracy, destroying their refuges, intercepting vessels, and relentlessly pursuing those who refused to submit. It was this unrelenting grip of Rogers, his determination and strategic genius, that cornered Rackham and his crew, foretelling their inevitable end. He was the embodiment of the inexorable force that ultimately consumed the world in which Mary and Anne had forged their bloody legend.